Hi Year 9, welcome back to your next lesson with me, Miss Theka. Last week we looked at the big three and their aims in terms of the creation of the Treaty of Versailles, but we didn't actually look in any depth at what the terms were of the Treaty of Versailles and why it was so unpopular. We just looked at what the Allied countries hoped to gain from the treaty. So today we are continuing with the Treaty of Versailles, but we're going to be looking at it in a little bit more depth to explain exactly what it was and what the policies of the Treaty of Versailles were, and why it was so unpopular. So this is going to be your last live lesson from me. You're not going to get one next week because today's lesson is going to be quite long. Normally, if we were in school, I would spend a couple of lessons on the Treaty of Versailles. So normally this would be like a double lesson. So today's YouTube lesson is going to be a little bit longer, so feel free to do it in two halves if you would prefer. There's also going to be a quiz on Teams that I'm going to put on today, touch wood that it all works, because I have been struggling a little bit with the quizzes on Teams. I haven't been quite doing them right, I don't think. That should go on, and then next week, instead of a YouTube lesson, I'm going to pop on some exam questions that I would like you to answer, one of which we're going to go over a little bit today, and then I might set a slightly longer question as well, because it's been a while since you'll have completed a 12-mark question. So it'll be interesting to see how you get on with them, considering you've had so long off school. Okay, so the title is, what was the Treaty of Versailles and why was it unpopular? The first thing I would like you to do is have a look at this cartoon, this drawing here, and just bullet point underneath your date and title. What can you infer from the source about attitudes towards the armistice? So the armistice was the agreed ceasefire between the countries that brought World War I to an end. So what can you infer from this drawing about the end of World War I from Germany's perspective? So pause me now, date and title in, and get anything you can, bullet point that down for me, please. Okay, so you may or may not remember this. Hopefully once I go back over it, it should ring some bells. That, if I just jump back, this cartoon, this drawing here, directly links to this theory here. So I'd like you to write this down for me, please. This is known as the stab-in-the-back theory. The stab-in-the-back theory was something that was widely believed by nationalists and by certain members of the German military, and this caused great problems later on for Germany, which we'll see evolve and develop over time. The German government agreed to sign the Treaty of Versailles in June 1919 to make peace. This action was very unpopular in Germany, and it was used by enemies of the government to claim that it had stabbed Germany in the back by ending the war. Opponents started to call them the November criminals. So essentially, and I think we will have discussed this in class, it's just been a while since, some people in Germany, some German nationalists, strongly believed that had World War I have continued for longer, that eventually Germany would have won. That's highly unlikely, and probably not true that that's the case, but that's what some people believed. Therefore, when some people found out that the war was over, the armistice had been agreed, and then several months later, the new German government had signed the Treaty of Versailles, which was very harsh, that made people really upset, really angry. They felt as though they had literally been stabbed in the back by their own government. And that is why, obviously, we celebrate Poppy Day on November, the 11th of November, to memorialise the end of World War I. But opponents in Germany didn't think of it that way. They thought actually of their politicians as being November criminals, that they had betrayed their own country and stabbed their own people in the back. So write that bit down, and then I've got a little clip I want you to watch. It's literally only 1 minute 14. I've tried to put it in the PowerPoint, but it hasn't worked. So I will put the link to this YouTube video in an email and on Teams as well. So you can just pause me now and find that next YouTube link, which I'll have sent to you, and just watch this 1 minute 14 clip, which talks a little bit more about the stab in the back theory and how that caused problems for Germany later on. So pause me and find that link now, please. Okay, so we know from last lesson that in January 1919, the superpowers of the world sat down in Paris, more specifically in Versailles in Paris, to talk about the terms of making world peace. Then in June 1919, Germany was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. So this wasn't a negotiation, it wasn't a debate, this was essentially a forced peace, which is why it was considered to be so controversial. Normally I would give you something to read and highlight, but we obviously can't do that. So instead, I'll talk through it, and as I'm talking, if you could bullet point some key bits down, that would be useful. So what kind of treaty was Germany expecting versus what kind of treaty Germany actually got? So bullet point, what were they expecting and what they actually got? Okay, so the Allies met in Versailles to draw up a peace treaty with Germany in 1919. Perhaps naively, many Germans felt that the treaty that was drawn up would be relatively lenient. If you are describing something or someone as being lenient, it means that they are being fair, that they have taken your thoughts into consideration. So, you know, if you hadn't done your homework for me and you sort of came and said, you know, I haven't done my homework this week, but, you know, I've been busy or whatever, and I said, all right, okay, fair enough, just bring it to me next week. That's lenient. That's the opposite of harsh. If I was being harsh, I would maybe scream and shout at you and give you a load of detentions until it was done. So a lot of Germans assumed that the treaty would be lenient towards them. Why did they think this? Well, Germany had embraced democracy. They had completely changed the structure of their government to match and to be more in keeping with other European countries of the time. The Kaiser had gone. So ultimately, the person who was responsible for Germany and responsible for Germany's actions in World War I was no longer the head of Germany. He had stepped down, he'd abdicated, he'd left, and he'd been replaced with a new democracy within Germany. The US President, Woodrow Wilson, believed that Germany should not be made to pay too dearly for war. And when Germans heard Woodrow Wilson speaking along those lines, they assumed that because the US was a powerful country, that therefore, if that's what Woodrow Wilson believed, then that is essentially what would be the making of the treaty, that they wouldn't be punished harshly, that they would be embraced by the European powers now that the Kaiser was gone and now that they were a democratic country. However, as we know, heavily influenced by the French desire for revenge, aka Georges Clemenceau that we were talking about last lesson, the Tiger, the treaty was drawn up and presented to the Germans, and it was devastatingly harsh. Although the first Weimar government refused to sign the treaty, they were forced to accept it, and they had to put pen to paper on June 28th, 1919. So what they were expecting is they were expecting leniency. They had embraced democracy, the Kaiser was gone, and they believed, because Woodrow Wilson had spoken openly, that they would not be made to pay too dearly. Whereas, what did they actually get? They got a treaty that was influenced by revenge. they got a treaty that was devastatingly harsh, and although they initially refused to sign it, they were forced. So this was a forced peace. So you can see why the Treaty of Versailles was certainly a tough pill to swallow for a lot of Germans who thought that it was just a step too far. Okay, so what were some of the key terms? So these are 3 words that I'm going to be talking about quite frequently over the next few slides. So I'd like you to get down the definitions for me, please, so you understand exactly what it is that they mean, so I don't have to explain them every time. So first off, I'm going to be mentioning the word reparations quite a lot. So write that down as your first key word and its definition. A reparation is when you pay money for damage, and that damage was caused by war. So Germany was made to pay harsh reparations, and reparations just means basically a cost of something. They had to pay for the damage caused by war, and that was known as reparations. 2, war guilt. Essentially, the war guilt clause was accepting responsibility for starting the war and causing all of the damage for war, and that damage not only included property and land, but it also included loss of life as well. So Germany were forced to accept war guilt, and that's just not like, you know, that guilty feeling you have in your tummy sometimes when you know, like, I've done something I probably shouldn't have. War guilt under the Treaty of Versailles meant so much more because they were accepting responsibility for damaged property and damaged life, and that comes at a cost. So war guilt and reparations kind of go hand in hand, really. And last, demilitarisation. This word always tends to confuse people a little bit. If an area is demilitarised, it means that no soldiers are allowed in that area. So even if that land is owned by Germany, they are not allowed to put their own German soldiers on that soil. It's demilitarised, it's neutral. And that becomes problematic later on. So I'll leave that on for a second so you can get those bits down. Okay, so terms of the Treaty of Versailles. That's a bit big. Make that a bit smaller. Taking up all of the screen. Go. The treaty can be split into 4 categories. First of all, territory. That's anything to do with land. Second, economics, which is money. 4, responsibility, which is blame, like the war guilt. And last but not least, military terms. So what I've done is, on your teams, you should have 2 sheets. Sorry, I'm just faffing on with these because it annoys me when they don't sit right. You should have 2 sheets. You should have one that looks like this, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet points on it, and also one that looks like this. This is harder to read because actually some of them are upside down because it was bits of paper that I'd copied and pasted from a textbook, so sorry, my bad. This here is less detailed than this one here. So if you like a challenge, do them both and give this sheet a go as well. Or if you would like something a little bit less detailed and you're finding it a little bit complicated, then just do this sheet here. But both will be on Teams, okay? So find this Word document here that has 8 bullet points on it. And obviously, normally we would stick this in and you would colour code it, but we can't do that now. But what I would like you to do is go through and highlight each term and then tell me, is that a territorial restriction? So is that something to do with land? Is it an economic restriction? Anything to do with money? Is it a responsibility, like a war guilt? Or is it to do with the military? Some of these can be more than one. In fact, some of them might be all 4. So don't just read the first 2 words and then think, territory. Make sure you read the full thing for me, please. So pause me now, find both those sheets, and complete this activity, and then I'll go through the answers for this sheet here. I won't do it for the more detailed one because it's a bit upside down, it's harder to read, but you should be able to do it, okay? So pause me now and complete this first activity. Okay, so answers for the slightly less detailed sheet. And when I say less detailed, I'm not saying that, you know, this is easy stuff. Really, terms of the Treaty of Versailles, you need to know them. So this is sort of some of the absolute essentials that you need to know when thinking about the key terms of the treaty. So first one, I've put that under territory. Alsace-Lorraine, which was a piece of land between France and Germany, which Germany took during the Franco-Prussian War, was to be returned to France. 2, I've put this as a mixture of territory and military. The Rhineland, which was a large piece of land separating France and Germany, in Germany was to be demilitarised. So no German soldiers can step foot in the Rhineland, even though that land still belongs to Germany. But the reason for that being is because it's so close to France. They were paranoid about being invaded again. Next one, I've put that as a mixture of territory and economic. The Saarland and its raw materials, particularly coal, was to be taken over by the League of Nations for 15 years. So when we talk about payment or reparation payments, sometimes these can be referred to as payment in kind. If it's payment in kind, that means you can't actually afford to pay cash, you can't afford to pay money. So you have to pay in other ways, and Germany paid mostly via raw materials such as coal and steel and iron and things like that. So the Allied countries thought, you know, if we can't physically take money from you because your economy is ruined, we'll just take goods from you instead. And the Saarland was rich in coal. So that coal was to be now taken over by the League of Nations and distributed to the Allied countries. Next one, responsibility. The War Guilt Clause, Article 231, which is also famously known as, meant that Germany was taking full responsibility for the damage caused during World War I. Sole responsibility. Very controversial one. Next one, economic. Germany had to pay reparations which equalled 6,600 million in total. This figure was eventually fixed to 132 million gold marks in 1921. Crazy amounts of money. Completely unrealistic. And the last 3 are military. Germany was not allowed military aircrafts or submarines. The German Navy was greatly reduced, and the German army was reduced to just 100,000 soldiers. Okay, so why did the Treaty of Versailles make Germany so angry? So I'd like you to get these bullet points down for me, please. Germany was left paying all the cost of war, and it had been given all of the blame. What makes that so controversial is this was a world war, and the amount of money that Germany were forced to pay was so unrealistic. It was going to completely crush the country. They deemed that to be very unfair. In addition, a lot of Germans actually claimed that their involvement in World War I had been self-defence. Even though Germany invades first through the Schlieffen Plan, actually Germans claimed that Russia mobilised first. So if you mobilise, that means you get your troops, your tanks, your ships, your planes ready for war. Germany had found out that Russia had mobilised. Therefore, Germany then mobilised and carried out the Schlieffen Plan, because they claimed that they were worried that Russia was going to invade them first. So for a lot of Germans who thought that they had acted in self-defence against a hostile Russia, why were they now being blamed for everything? They deemed that to be very unfair. Germany was blocked from peace talks. Germany was not invited to the Treaty of Versailles. So this was a forced peace. It wasn't a constructive peace. It wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a debate. It was literally forced upon Germany. And Germans felt that was very harsh. Everybody else had been given a seat at the table. So why were they not given a seat as well? And again, it comes back to this idea of the whole point of the Treaty of Versailles was to make Europe a peaceful place again, make the world a peaceful place again. But if you are not inviting a key player of the war to take part in these peace talks, then what is the point? It's only going to cause further hostility and further problems later down the line. They were quite literally forced to sign. So a lot of people, a lot of students say when we teach the Treaty of Versailles, well, Germany was stupid to agree. Why on earth would you agree to that? Well, they were threatened with occupation. Occupation means permanent invasion. So basically they were told, if you don't sign, we will just invade your country, and then they'll have nothing left. They won't have any of their rights or liberties or freedom left. They would be absorbed by the Allied countries, and that's what Germany didn't want. That's literally the only thing that Germany had left, the fact that she was still an independent state and an independent country. So they had no choice. It had to be signed. The treaty left Germany vulnerable and weak. It was once a superpower of the world, but now she was crushed. That was something that David Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of the UK during this time, that is something that he really did not want to see. He understood that Germany was and could still be a key power to trade with. He wanted to make sure that Germany's economy wasn't ruined so that she could stay a key player within Europe. But that hadn't happened. Germany's economy was completely thrashed as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, and she was crushed. And it didn't look as though there was going to be any way for her to recover properly whilst she was still paying these incredibly harsh reparation payments. Germany felt robbed of key industries, e.g. coal from the Saarland, and iron and steel given to Alsace-Lorraine and also given to the League of Nations. They felt that that was deeply unfair, that reparations had ruined their economy, and now their raw materials were being taken away from them as well. It's a little bit like it's a fine that someone can never pay. So it almost just seemed like a ridiculous made-up amount of money. Like, if any of you have seen the Austin Powers films, when Dr. Evil is doing really bad negotiations with the President of the United States. He's threatening to like blow up the planet unless the President can give him $1 bajillion. And everyone bursts out laughing and says, that's just ridiculous. That's not even a real amount of money. Well, this was almost a similar sort of situation. 132 million gold marks, yet Germany's economy was ruined. Where was she going to get this money from? Well, she can't sell her raw materials because you're taking all of that as well. So Germany really was left with absolutely nothing. Furthermore, innocent people were left literally paying the price, and this was a price that they simply could not afford, and this really upset the ordinary German. It was the citizens that were being punished for the Kaiser's behaviour. The Kaiser isn't even here anymore, he's abdicated, he is not the leader of Germany. So it's regular people like me and you that a lot of people didn't want World War One. They had no choice, and now they're left paying the price for it. People's children were starving to death because of these high reparation payments. So people literally couldn't feed their own children because of this. So you can see why the Germans were so upset. It was devastatingly harsh. Okay, next bit. In fact, I might just leave that on for 30 seconds because I've not got my laptop plugged in and I'm a little bit worried that my battery's going to run out. So I'll leave that on whilst no doubt some of you are still writing, and let me just plug my laptop in. There we go, that's better. Okay, so what was the price of peace? The next little clip I want you to watch looks like this. Again, I will have sent you the link to this. It's just over 3 minutes long. It's called World War One, the Treaty of Versailles, and that's how it starts. And what I want you to do is I want you to watch the clip, and then obviously it says discuss, but you can't, so just bullet point. How the Treaty of Versailles contributed to the unpopularity of the Republic. So this links back to the image that we were looking at the start, stabbing the back theory, the November criminals. Ultimately, the new Weimar Republic was blamed for the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, which meant that from day one, this newly formed republic was on shaky grounds due to her unpopularity. So what impact did the Treaty of Versailles have on the new republic? Then we've got one last thing I want to do. So pause me now, watch this video clip and bullet point, how did the Treaty of Versailles contribute to the unpopularity of the republic? Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is a little bit of source analysis. So you're going to jot some points down about this source, and then next week when I said I'm going to set you some little exam questions, I'm going to set you a little 4-mark question to answer about this source, okay? So I'm not going to say anything to start off with. I want you to try to unpick this yourself, although I completely appreciate that some of the words might be a little bit blurry, so I'll just point some stuff out to you here. The thumb is called British Empire. This finger here is France, America, Italy, Japan. This pill here is peace terms. These people here are saying you've got to swallow it whether you like it or not. And this box here is called Big Four Pills, worth millions, and the caption is called Der Tag. So what I want you to do is, before I go through the source with you, I'd like you to just bullet point anything that you can spot about this satirical source. If something's satirical, it's mocking the situation. What does this source show about the Treaty of Versailles? Okay, some points to put down if you didn't get them. So we'll start here because this is the most obvious. This big pill here is representing the Treaty of Versailles, and the pill is literally being forced down Germany's throat. But you can see by the size of the spoon and by the size of the actual pill that it's far too much for Germany to take. If Germany takes this peace term, if Germany tries to swallow this pill, it's going to kill Germany because it's far too big for them. But you can see Germany here represented by this sort of elderly looking man is being held there. The assistants are holding Germany down, and that is the British Empire, France, America, Italy and Japan. It's got its hands firmly clasped around Germany, keeping them still. Here are the victorious countries, USA, France, Britain, Italy. But if you look, they are having to stand on the big pills box, whereas Germany is much bigger. So what I think that's representing is that actually all of these countries, all of these men are little in comparison to the big, strong, powerful Germany, or what was the big, strong, powerful Germany. And that actually the only way for these little men to take Germany down is to work together. And if they work together and all grapple Germany at the same time, then they can defeat her and they can bring Germany down. And they're obviously stood on the big pill, the 4 big pills box that are worth $1 million. This is obviously representing again the Treaty of Versailles that they are now forcing upon Germany. They say you've got to swallow it whether you like it or not. which is showing just how harsh the treaty was, particularly the war guilt clause. A lot of Germans were confused as to why they were being forced to accept all of the blame, and it's also quite threatening in tone. Whether you like it or not, you will accept these peace terms. We know that that's true. It wasn't a negotiation. Germany wasn't invited to the peace talks. And if they didn't agree, if they didn't swallow the pill, then they were threatened with occupation. It also, you can see by sort of the shocked and startled look on Germany's face, that some of the other things that Germany was quite upset with is the fact that Germany felt as though she'd been robbed of key industry, iron, steel. It had a big impact on Germany's economy, which again shows all of the little men working together to sort of squeeze the life out of Germany. They are not only taking her money and the fact that she was once a European superpower, they're squeezing that out of her as well, but they're also squeezing key industry and raw materials. And last one, the source is called Der Tag, which translates to the day in German, and that is a little bit like if we're kind of saying like, oh God, what a day, what a day. That's sort of a similar phrase in Germany. The day, as in, oh, that was a tough day at work, tough day in the office. Again, obviously written in a sort of a satirical tone, but showing just how much people found the Treaty of Versailles so devastatingly harsh and also cripplingly unfair. So that's me done. I'm not going to talk at you anymore. My voice is starting to hurt, which is normally a good indication that I've spoke for too long. So remember, you've got this lesson to watch, but you've also got a quiz to complete, and then next week there won't be another YouTube lesson as such, because this one was a little bit longer than normal, but there will be this little 4-mark question on Teams and then a slightly longer 4-mark question for you to complete as well. Okay, so thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll speak to you again later.